This is Claude, model, dancer, photographer. This is the Colbor CL220R, a continuous light app controlled with RGB functions. In today's video, we're in the Photo Cove, a studio in Manchester, shooting with Claude and the Colbor CL220R, using the light in 3 different ways to achieve 3 very different lighting setups. So let's get into it. So setup number 1 was a really simple setup using the Colbor light alone with a Bowens softbox. The Colbor uses a Bowens mount, which means that it's really easy to customize the look of the light by using different modifiers that most studios that you use will probably have access to. So we used a really large softbox and mounted that onto a stand with the light with a boom arm, meaning that we could rig the light from above. Using overhead light sources with large modifiers for diffusion are a great way to create really even lighting when you're using just one light. You can also then throw in things like polyboards or V-flats or reflectors to create more direction with the light, or to create the illusion of having maybe used more than one light from different directions. And we did do this within this setup. We used a polyboard with the white side facing Claude to add a little bit of directional light, a little bit more of a bounce, and also a reflector from the floor just to kind of add that little bit more light onto the lower part of the image and onto Claude's face. The Colbor Studio app that is compatible with the CL220R also gives the added benefit of being able to easily customize the settings of the light, even when it's rigged like this in difficult to reach places. So that meant that once we got the light into position, we can kind of keep it there until we've decided we're done with this look, we're done with this setup, and we want to change it about. So for example, this isn't something I did in this shoot, but if I wanted to change this overhead light to red, for example, or to a different temperature of white light, then I could do so without having to de-rig everything and bring it all down, which is especially handy if you're kind of a short photographer like me and you don't want to have to constantly be moving lights or getting up ladders and stuff like that. The brightness of the light also meant that it was okay for us to rig the light further away from the model because that light was still plentiful. It also makes it a lot more compatible with things like shooting film where you're using a predetermined ISO. For example, we shot a couple of frames on Polaroid film using the Polaroid i2, and the film that we were using, the color I-type, has an approximate ISO of 640. I didn't shoot any other film other than Polaroid on this shoot, but the light is definitely bright enough for you to be able to easily shoot with an 800 speed film or maybe even a 400 speed film, especially when you consider that the Polaroid i2 has a maximum aperture of f8, and most lenses, most cameras are able to open up a lot wider than that, so you'd be able to let a lot more light in, so you wouldn't have to stop down to as slow shutter speeds as we were using on the Polaroid if you were shooting with a different kind of film camera. Setup number 2 used 2 lights, one being the Colbor light of course, and then the second was a Bowens XMS 500 strobe light with a beauty dish. So for this look, we placed the Colbor behind Claude without a modifier, but behind a sheet of plastic, and we set it to the RGB mode, meaning that we could quickly customize the look by altering the color of the light. So the light being behind and slightly to the side of Claude, and also behind a sheet of plastic, gave this illusion of a background colour whilst also adding a side light to Claude. So this is again another way that you could utilise one light but kind of make it look like 2 different lights are being used. So we shot this lighting setup in 2 different ways. For both lighting setups, we kept the Colbor behind and to the side of Claude, but in the first setup we used the strobe as a flash that lit the front side opposite to the Colbor light of Claude. We used a slow shutter speed to help the colour of the continuous light come through, and also to get some images where we dragged the shutter. Dragging the shutter is essentially where you use a slow shutter speed and a strobe light, and the strobe freezes the image, but you move with the camera as you take it, and because you're doing that with a slow shutter speed, you're kind of blurring the ambient light, so in this case the continuous Colbor light. For the second approach to this same setup, we kept the strobe light where it was and the Colbor light, but we disconnected the camera from the trigger and then it would only act as a modelling light. So it gave us kind of like a soft, continuous light on the front of Colbor. And then we were able to achieve kind of like a split lighting look with a warm neutral light coming from the Bowens light and a colour light coming from the Colbor light. In the final setup, we attached a reflector dish to the Colbor light and utilised a direct light harsh look, making use of a coloured wall in the bathroom of the studio. But these are just 3 examples of how you could use this light. But really the possibilities of using the CL220R can be endless when you consider all of the different modifiers that you could pair it with and all of the different colours across the spectrum that you could use it with. As someone who personally shoots a lot of film in my practice, having a strong continuous light is an instrumental part of my kit, and the Colbor CL220R does not disappoint. A big thank you to Colbor for modelling and to Grace and Sujan for assisting. The behind the scenes footage in this video was all shot by Grace, who is an amazing photographer and model based in Manchester. I'm going to link the whole team in the description alongside the Colbor CL220R, but thank you guys so much for watching and I will see you in the next one.